The sky above the junkyard was always orange, covered with thick clouds of dust and rust. Old machines, broken starships, and sharp metal pieces were scattered everywhere. This place was forgotten by the world, just a giant trash graveyard on a dry planet no one cared about. Rick Carter walked slowly through the wreckage, his boots crunching on broken glass and wires. He was a human scavenger, strong but quiet. With a scar on his cheek and grease always on his hands, he lived alone in this junkyard, collecting anything useful to sell off-world. But today, something felt different. He had been searching for old circuit boards near a crashed freighter when he heard it, a soft, weak sound, like breathing ore. Was it a whisper? He paused, holding his breath, his eyes scanning the shadows between the rusted piles. Again, the sound came. ... Help. It was very faint, but real. Rick slowly moved toward the voice, pushing aside broken panels and wires. Then he saw her. Buried halfway under metal sheets was a woman, not a human, an alien. Her skin was a soft, glowing purple. Her long hair? Tangled and dirty, she looked young, maybe in her 20s if compared to human age. Her lower body was completely still, and her left arm hung limp, twisted at a strange angle. Her eyes opened slowly, bright and golden like twin moons. "Don't touch me," she whispered, though her voice had no strength. Rick knelt beside her, shocked and speechless. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said calmly. "You're injured." She tried to move, but her body didn't respond. Tears filled her eyes. "I can't." "Feel my legs?" Rick gently brushed dirt off her face. "It's okay, I'll get you out of here." The alien woman looked at him with disbelief. "No one comes here to save, only to take." Rick didn't answer. He just lifted her carefully from the scrap pile, making sure her neck and back were supported. She gasped from the pain, but didn't fight him. Her body was cold, her clothes torn, and her skin bruised as Rick carried her through the junkyard. A strong wind blew sand into his face. He turned his back to shield her from it. In the distance, strange figures watched from behind the broken hull of an old warship. They didn't move, just observed, silently. Rick didn't notice them. He reached his small shelter shack made from old spaceship parts and solar panels. Inside, it was warm, filled with gadgets, lights, and his tools. He gently placed her on a padded table, covering her with a soft thermal blanket. "What's your name?" he asked while checking her wounds. She hesitated. "Vela? I'm Rick," he said simply. Giving her a sip of clean water, her throat moved slowly, as if swallowing was difficult. "No one was supposed to find me," she whispered. Almost to herself, Rick's hands paused. "What do you mean?" Vela turned her head away. "I was thrown here, left to die." He stared at her in shock. "By who?" "My family," she answered, voice breaking. "They said I was broken." Ashamed to them, Rick didn't speak for a long moment. He had seen cruelty in many forms, but this was something else. He walked to a cabinet, pulled out a medical kit, and returned to her side. "You're not broken," he said firmly. "You're hurt, that's all." Vela looked at him with wide, confused eyes. No one ever said that before. Outside, a shadow moved silently across the metal ground. A small blinking device was hidden under a broken engine near Rick's shelter. It was a tracker, and someone, somewhere, had just received a signal. Back inside, Rick was already planning. He needed to build something to help her move, a chair maybe, or hover sled. He didn't know why he cared so much, but when he looked at Vela, lying there with tears drying on her glowing cheeks, he knew he couldn't leave her like this. She had been left to die like trash in a junkyard. But he wasn't going to let that happen. Not to her, not again, and far above the clouds. A ship changed its course, heading straight for the junkyard. Whoever left her behind wasn't done yet. Rick stayed awake all night, working on a way to help the alien girl move. Outside his shelter, the wind howled like a dying animal, blowing dust against the metal walls. Inside, it was quiet except for the soft breathing of the alien woman lying on his work table. Her name was Vela, and she had been left here like junk, unable to move or even stand. Rick used scrap parts from an old hover cart and mixed them with broken robotics. His hands were tired, fingers bleeding from sharp wires, but he didn't stop. She needed something to help her move, to be free again by sunrise. Rick had built a basic wheelchair. It wasn't perfect, just 4 wheels and a support frame, but it would work. He looked at Vela, still sleeping, her face peaceful but pale. He whispered to himself, "She's not junk." When Vela woke up, she blinked slowly, confused. "Where?" "M1. "My workshop," Rick said, offering her a bottle of water. "You were passed out all night." She drank quietly, then looked down at her useless legs. She didn't cry, but her silence was full of pain. Rick rolled the homemade chair next to her. "I made this for you," he said. "It's not pretty, but it moves." Vela stared at the chair like it was magic. "You did this?" "For me?" Rick nodded. "Yeah, you can't lie on a table forever." "But why?" she asked, voice shaking. "Why help me?" Rick shrugged, because no one else did. He gently lifted her and placed her into the chair. Vela gasped slightly from the movement, but her eyes never left Rick's face. As she sat in the chair, her body upright for the first time in days, she whispered, "I don't deserve this." Rick knelt in front of her. "You didn't deserve what they did to you either." For a moment, there was just silence between them. A silence filled with pain, questions, and something new hope. Later that day, Vela looked around the junkyard from the edge of Rick's shelter. Her chair was bumpy on the rough ground, but she didn't care. She hadn't seen the sky in days. Even the dusty wind felt good on her face. Rick worked nearby, pulling apart an old hover engine. Vela finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "You should know who I am." Rick looked up. "All right, I'm from the Alari Royal Line," she said, eyes focused on the horizon. "My family is powerful, proud, perfect." Rick raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't sound like the kind of people who abandon their own." "They don't keep the broken," she said bitterly. "An accident. A battle. I lost my legs. They said I was a shame to the family. They left me here, with a broken communicator and a weak beacon. I think they wanted someone to find me. Just not alive." Rick clenched his fists. "That's sick." Vela looked at him. "That's Ilari honor. If you're not perfect, you are forgotten." Rick walked over and sat next to her on a broken piece of ship wing. "Well, they forgot something important." "What?" she asked. "That broken doesn't mean worthless." Vela looked at him, confused. He continued, "You're still breathing. You're still strong. And from what I've seen, you're still very much alive." Her eyes softened. "You're strange human," Rick smirked. "Takes one to know one." They both chuckled a little. It was the first time Vela had laughed. In what felt like forever, as the day ended, Rick cooked a simple meal using his solar cooker. He gave Vela a bowl simple protein mash with some dried fruits. She stared at it, then looked at Rick again. "I thought you might try to sell me. Or use me," she said honestly. Rick shook his head. "You're not a thing. You're a person." Vela nodded slowly, feeling a strange warmth inside her chest. Not from the food, but from something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time, safety, but far away from their little camp. Danger was getting closer. A bounty ship had entered the planet's atmosphere. Inside, a tall alien with silver skin watched a blinking light on his console. "Target location confirmed," he said with a grin. "Alive?" asked another voice. "Seems like it," the hunter replied. "Unfortunate. The client wanted her gone. Then we finished the job." As night fell, Vela sat beside Rick, staring at the stars. "Do you believe people can start over?" she asked. Rick didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I believe we can choose who we want to be." Vela looked at him, her golden eyes glowing faintly. "Then maybe. I'll choose to be someone who fights back." Rick smiled. "Good, because I think trouble is coming." And in the sky above, red lights blinked as the bounty ship began its descent. The junkyard was no longer a forgotten place. It was about to become a battlefield. And the woman they tried to throw away was no longer alone. The next morning was quiet, but Rick felt something strange in the air. The sky over the junkyard was darker than usual, and the wind had stopped. Even the birds that usually circled above were gone. It was too quiet, too still. Rick checked the solar panels outside and adjusted the antenna. He was used to being alone, but now he was watching everything with alert eyes. Since he found Vela, something in his gut kept whispering danger, and he had learned to trust that voice. Inside the shelter, Vela was awake early, practicing small movements with her one working arm. Her body was weak, but her mind was sharper than ever. She used to be royalty, a trained strategist before the accident. Now her instincts were coming back. She stared out the narrow window and said softly, "Rick, someone's watching us." Rick didn't respond at first. He just looked at her, nodded slowly, and then reached under the floorboard. He pulled out an old mining rifle, rusty but still loaded. "You felt it too?" he asked. Vela nodded. "Yes, and it's not just the wind." Rick stepped outside and scanned the junkyard with binoculars. At first, there was nothing, just the same rusted ships and metal mountains. But then, a glint far out near the broken tower crane. Something moved, too smooth, too shiny, and not made of junk. "Company," Rick muttered. Turning back inside, Vela's eyes narrowed. "Who is it?" Rick looked at her seriously. "I don't know, but they've got gear. Maybe bounty hunters." Vela froze, her fingers tightening around the armrest of her wheelchair. She whispered, "My family must have sent them. They're here to finish me." Rick paced the room, thinking fast. "Then we don't wait for them to knock," he said. Grabbing a small toolkit and motioning for Vela to follow, "We're going underground." He led her to a hidden hatch. Beneath the junkyard, the tunnel he used to hide valuable scrap from raiders. The tunnel was narrow and dark, but safe. He lit the path with old glow sticks and guided her wheelchair carefully through the maze of pipes and debris. "This leads to an old ship's cargo hold buried under the yard," Rick explained. "They'll never find us there if we stay quiet." But Vela wasn't convinced. "They won't stop until they see my body," she said flatly. Rick turned to her. "Then we make them think you're gone." Back above, the bounty ship landed with a soft thump. Dust flew as two tall alien figures stepped out, one silver-skinned with a long cloak, the other with a mechanical arm and red eyes. They scanned the area with advanced sensors, following the weak signal. "From the tracker, she's close," the one with the cloak said. "But she's moving," replied the red-eyed one. "That shouldn't be possible. She must have had help." The silver alien smirked. "Let's find the hero." Meanwhile, Rick set up a fake trail, placing an old dummy in a burnt hovercart. Wrapping it in a thermal blanket, he placed the tracker on it and pushed it into a clearing, right beneath a rusted metal crane. Then he activated the crane's old magnet and waited. Sure enough, the bounty hunters found the cart. "There she is," one said, aiming his weapon as they stepped closer. Rick hit the switch. The magnet came alive with a loud clang, sucking up every metal weapon and slamming the bounty hunters into the side of the crane. Rick jumped from his hiding spot and opened fire. His shots weren't perfect, but enough to make them scatter. "Go back to whoever sent you," he shouted. The red-eyed alien growled, "We're not here for you, human. Give us the girl and walk away." Rick reloaded. "Not happening." back in the tunnel. Vela heard the blasts above. Her hands trembled half from fear, half from rage. This man, this stranger, was risking everything to save her. Why? Why? Would someone fight for a broken alien who had been thrown away? She looked around and spotted a small side tunnel Rick hadn't sealed. Inside, there were parts batteries, cables, and a damaged plasma pistol. Her hands moved fast, driven by instinct and anger. She wired the gun to her chair, using her knowledge of old weapons. It wasn't stable, but it would shoot. I won't let him fight alone. She whispered to herself. Above, Rick ducked behind a metal slab as plasma blasts flew past his head. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and bleeding from a cut on his leg. Still, he smiled to himself. This is better than dying bored. Then, a shot rang out from behind the bounty hunters. One of them fell. Hit in the shoulder by a surprise blast, they turned and saw Vela rolling toward them in her broken chair, smoke rising from the pistol she'd just fired. "You forgot something," she said, her voice fierce. "I may be broken, but I'm not helpless." Rick used the distraction to tackle the other bounty hunter and knock him down. Together, they forced the attackers to retreat. The ship lifted off, leaving behind smoke and silence. After it was over, Rick sat down. Breathing hard, Vela rolled next to him, her arms shaking from the effort. "I told you to stay hidden," he said with a tired smile. "And I told you I'm not junk," she replied. They laughed softly. Two broken souls in a junkyard full of metal and memories, but in that moment, they were more powerful than any hunter or noble. They had chosen to fight for each other. Far above the clouds, another ship received a message. Targets still alive. Human interference confirmed, and a reply came back. Send the family. End this. Permanently, the next few days were quiet, but the kind of quiet that made the skin crawl. Rick and Vela both knew it wasn't over, not yet. The first wave of bounty hunters had failed, but someone more powerful would come next. Someone who wouldn't stop until Vela was gone for good. Rick spent most of the time upgrading the shelter. He added hidden alarms, rebuilt the energy grid, and buried more traps across the junkyard. He even modified Vela's wheelchair, attaching shock pads to the arms and a rotating mini laser made from spare drone parts. Vela, though still weak, was no longer helpless. She spent hours studying the old maps Rick had stored, learning the junkyard's layout, its blind spots and narrow paths. "This place is like a broken kingdom," she said one night. Looking around the dusty metal piles, Rick chuckled. Then, "I guess that makes you its queen." She smiled, but it faded quickly. "My people would laugh at that," she said. "A queen in a wheelchair." In a trash heap, Rick looked her in the eyes. "Then they don't deserve you." One morning, a sound broke the silence, a deep humming from the sky, followed by the loud rush of air. Rick and Vela ran outside, or rather, Rick ran while Vela rolled. They looked up and saw it, a massive golden ship. Not sleek or deadly looking, but Royal Ilari family crest on the side. Glowing blue, her family had arrived. Rick narrowed his eyes. "That's not a hunter ship." Vela's face went cold. "That's worse." The ship landed gently. As if mocking the junk below it, a silver ramp extended slowly, and down walked three Ilari, nobles tall, proud, dressed in flowing white robes with glowing stones. The one in front was her mother, Lady Selena, her face blanked like a carved statue. She looked at Vela and didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't smile. "You're still alive," she said softly, like it was a disappointment. Rick stepped in front of Vela, holding his rifle. Lady Selena looked him up and down like he was a worm. "You must be the human," she said. "The junk collector who played hero." Rick didn't move. "She's not junk," the noble woman tilted her head. "She is to us." Vela pushed forward, her voice steady. "Why are you here, Mother?" Lady Selena answered with a calm, cruel tone. To fix the mistake, you weren't supposed to survive. Your pain, your brokenness sits. A stain on our name. Rick's fists clenched, so you just throw her in the trash. Like garbage. The other noble beside Lady Selena stepped forward, offering a small metal case to Rick. This is payment, he said. Enough credits to live like a king on a human world. If you walk away now, Rick looked down at the Casey, then slowly pushed it back. No deal, he said. You can take your dirty money and get off my junkyard. Lady Selena's face stayed cold. You'd give up a fortune. For this, she said, nodding at her daughter. Rick turned to Vela, who met his eyes without fear. Yes, he said. Because she's worth more than all your credits combined. The nobles stared in silence, shocked. A human, a nobody. From a trash planet had refused them. Lady Selena's eyes narrowed. Very well, she said coldly, stepping back. She raised a small communicator to her lips. Plan B, she whispered. The golden ship's engines roared to life. But not to leave. Instead, 2 hatches opened on the sides, and elite Ilarian forcers jumped out, wearing black armor and carrying energy weapons. Rick pulled Vela behind him. Get back inside, shouted. I'm not leaving you. Vela yelled, charging her chair's defenses. The junkyard lit up with energy blasts. Sparks flying, metal melting. Rick dodged between piles, using his trap's hidden wires, shocked one soldier. A falling crane crushed another. Vela used her chair's laser to cut through a support beam, dropping a full cargo shell on 2 more attackers. But there were too many. One of the enforcers caught Rick in the side with a pulse shot. He cried out and fell behind a wrecked engine. Vela screamed, spinning her chair toward him. But a soldier blocked her way. You don't belong here, the soldier hissed, raising his weapon. Neither do you, she growled, and blasted his feet out from under him. Vela dragged Rick to cover, her hand shaking. You're bleeding, she said. Pressing on the wound, Rick laughed weakly, still alive. Thanks to you, the royal ship hovered low again, this time blasting a wave of sound across the yard. Everything shook. Vela leaned close, whispering, we end this now. She pressed a hidden button Rick had given her earlier, triggering the last trap, a buried fuel tank. The explosion rocked the yard, blinding light, fire, and falling metal. The ship pulled back, retreating into the sky with its nobles screaming. Over the comms, smoke covered everything. But the fighting stopped. Rick coughed as he sat up slowly. Vela sat beside him, her body covered in dust, her wheelchair scorched but still standing. They'll come back, he said. Vela nodded. Let them, because now. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for something greater. For dignity, for love, and for every soul the world ever threw away. Smoke still hung in the air like a heavy blanket. Metal groaned as broken parts shifted in. The ruins of the junkyard. Rick sat against a rusted container, one hand pressing against his wound, the other gripping a wrench as a weapon. Beside him, Vela sat in her scorched chair, staring into the wreckage where the royal ship had fled. They were alive, but just barely, and this time, Vela wasn't going to wait for someone to rescue her. She rolled over to Rick, her voice calm but firm. You need rest, or you'll die from that wound. Rick gave a weak smile. You're the boss now. Yes, she said, not smiling. Now listen. She used a tool Rick had built to seal his wound, burning the edge slightly to stop the bleeding. Rick passed out from the pain, but Vela didn't flinch. She had seen pain, lived with it for weeks in that junk pile, and now it didn't scare her anymore. After she made sure Rick was safe in the shelter, she rolled back into the heart of the junkyard. There were parts everywhere, broken drones, shattered weapons, melted armor, and cracked power cores. Most people would see garbage, But Vela saw opportunity with her one good arm and her sharp mind. She began to work. She attached metal plates to her wheelchair to create armor. She fixed the aim system on the mini laser and wired it to her chair's control panel. She even added a small drone camera to her headrest so she could see behind her. Every hour she worked, her fingers burned. Her shoulders ached and her back screamed, but she didn't stop. Because she remembered the look in Rick's eyes when he collapsed, he didn't fight for her because she was beautiful or royal. He fought because he believed she mattered, even when she didn't believe it herself. That night, she rolled to the edge of the yard and stared at the stars. She whispered softly, "I am not trash." The next morning, a message crackled through the old CUM system. Final warning. Hand over the Ilari woman, or your entire junkyard will be erased. It was her brother's voice. Walt, proud, full of poison. Vela didn't respond. She rolled into the shelter, found Rick slowly waking up. "I heard the message," he said weakly. "I know." She replied, "I'm not running anymore." Rick smiled. "What's the plan, Queen of Junk?" Vela raised an eyebrow. "We turned this place into a trap, together." They activated every broken security system Rick had collected over the years. Old defense drones were reprogrammed to follow Vela's signal. Electric fences were wired. From old battery cells, explosive scrap piles were carefully placed in all the main paths. But Vela didn't stop there. She recorded a video, her face covered in dirt and scars. Sitting in her armor-covered chair, to her own people, she said, "I was abandoned. Left in the dirt like I was nothing, but a human showed me I am not worthless. If you want me dead, come face me yourselves. But know this, if I die, I will die fighting." She sent the message to the Ilari network. It spread across space like fire, shocking nobles and citizens alike. No one had ever seen a royal speak like this. No one had no legs, no throne, and no army within hours. 2 more bounty ships approached the planet, but this time, Vela was ready. She took position in the highest part of the junkyard, where the view was wide. The drones hovered around her, and her chair's laser beeped. Fully charged, the first ship landed hard, trying to block escape routes. Soldiers rushed forward but tripped hidden wires, triggering explosions. The second ship tried to fly low and drop snipers. But Vela guided drones to attack its wings, making it crash into the side of an old transport ship. Smoke and fire filled the yard again. Rick, still weak but armed, fired from a high perch, taking out attackers trying to reach Vela. One soldier broke through the trapline and aimed his rifle at her back. She saw him in her rear camera, spun her chair fast, and shocked him with the sidearm's electric pads. She looked down at the stunned attacker and said, "I may not walk, but I stand for something." The battle raged for 20 minutes before the enemy forces pulled back again. Too many losses, too many surprises. They retreated, leaving behind fire, broken bot sand, a legend. Vela rolled back to the shelter, her armor scratched and her arms shaking from the effort. Rick looked up at her with amazement. "You're a war machine?" he said. "No," she answered. "I'm just someone who decided not to be forgotten." That night, the junkyard was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't silence from fear, it was the calm after victory. Vela looked at the stars once more and whispered, "Tomorrow, I fight again," because she wasn't a victim anymore. She was a warrior one who fought even without legs. And now, the galaxy was starting to listen. The fire had cooled, but the junkyard still smelled like smoke and broken metal. Birds didn't come back, and the wind stayed quiet. Vela rolled slowly through the wreckage, her armor dented, her chair humming with low power. She passed by fallen soldiers, damaged drones, and blackened ships. This was not the battlefield of a queen. But it was hers. This was the place she defended. Not because it was beautiful, but because someone believed she was worth saving. Rick was resting inside the shelter, his wound healing slowly. He watched Vela through the cracked window, shaking his head in disbelief. "She's not just surviving," he whispered to himself. "She's changing the whole damn story." That evening, a message played through the junkyard's old speaker system. This time, there was no warning, no threat, only a soft, cold voice. "This is Lady Selena of House Ilari. I will arrive at sunset." Alone, Rick frowned when he heard it. Alone. Vela stared at the speaker, eyes narrowing. "She never does anything without a reason," she said. "She's coming to end this. With words or with poison." When the sun began to fall behind the mountains of trash, the golden ship returned. But this time, it didn't land with force. It touched down gently. As if trying to pretend nothing had happened, the ramp lowered and Lady Selena walked down. Her white robes spotless, her face untouched by the dust of war. No guards, no weapons, just a small glowing orb in her hand. Vela met her at the center of the yard, surrounded by fire-scorched metal and old machines. Rick stood beside her, leaning on a crutch made of scrap and pipe. Selena looked at them both like they were insects. "So this is what you've become," she said softly, "a queen of broken things." With a crippled man at her side, Rick didn't move, didn't speak, but Vela leaned forward in her chair. Her voice sharp. "No, mother," she said. "This is who I've always been. You just never looked long enough to see me." Lady Selena didn't flinch. She held up the glowing orbit, projected a memory, a young Vela in royal armor, standing proudly in a golden hall. Then the accident explosions, screams, and her fall from a cliff. Then darkness. Finally, the memory showed her family standing over her broken body, shaking their heads, walking away. Rick felt his jaw tighten. "You recorded leaving her to die?" he asked in disbelief. Selena turned to him. "It was for record keeping. Honor requires evidence." Vela's eyes filled with fire. "You left me in pain, in silence, in trash," she growled. "And now that I've survived, you come here with empty hands." Selena's voice was calm. "To calm. You caused shame to our family. Now your message has spread through the Ilari network. Some see you as brave, others as a stain. But it's over now. Come home, Vela." Rick's eyes widened. "What?" he whispered. Vela looked shocked too. "You're asking me to return?" Her mother nodded slowly. "Come back. Quietly. You'll be hidden. Safe. Forgotten again, but no more explosions. No more humans." Rick clenched his fist. "You want her to disappear again. So your name stays clean." Selena didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was full of truth. Vela rolled forward, her voice steady and strong. "I will never go back to the place that buried me alive." Selena's lips tightened. "You are still my daughter." "No," Vela said, raising her chin. "I was your prisoner, your shame, your forgotten thing. Now I am Vela Scrapborn. This junkyard is my palace, and this human is more family than you ever were." Rick looked at her, surprised by the fire in her voice. His heart pounded, not from fear, but pride. Selena's face cracked just slightly, a flicker of anger in her perfect eyes. "I came to offer you peace," she said. Vela nodded. "Then leave in peace. Because if you send more hunters, I'll send their armor back in boxes." Rick stepped forward, limping but firm. "And if you ever threaten her again, I'll turn this whole junkyard into a graveyard." For a moment, the air was still. Then Lady Selena turned slowly and walked back toward her ship. No more words, no more threats. Just the sound of her footsteps fading into the dust as the ship lifted and vanished into the sky. Vela finally exhaled. Rick looked at her. "You okay?" Vela smiled, small, but real, "For the first time in my life." "Yes." They stood, or rather, stood and sat side by side, surrounded by junk and ash, but neither felt weak anymore. Because when the people who once defined you return, and you face them, that's when you become free. 3 days passed since the golden ship left the junkyard sky. There were no more messages, no more threats. Just wind moving through the rusted bones of old machines and the soft hum of life beginning again. Rick sat outside the shelter, welding broken panels back onto an old generator. His body still ached from the battle, but his hands worked with purpose. Behind him, soft wheels rolled across the dirt. Vela moved with ease now, her upgraded chair smooth, her armor removed. She wore simple clothes, Rick's spare work jacket. Over her shoulders, a tool pouch tied to her waist. Her face looked different, now not softer, but clearer. The sadness in her golden eyes had faded, replaced by focus. Generators making noise again, she said with a small smirk. Rick looked up and wiped his forehead. That's your fault, mine? She asked. Yeah, you overloaded it with your chair upgrades. Vela shrugged. Worth it. They both laughed, tired, honest laughter. Not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that comes after surviving it. Rick stood slowly, rubbing his leg. Shelter's coming along, he said. Looking at the repaired walls and new energy lines, Vela nodded. It could be more. Rick raised a brow. More? She turned her chair toward the highest pile of junk in the yard. What if this place wasn't just for us? She said. What if it was a home for others like me? The thrown away, the broken, the forgotten? Rick blinked, surprised by her words. You mean? Turn this into a shelter. A haven, she said softly. A place where no one is judged by what they've lost. Rick thought about it, then nodded. You've already got the crown, he joked. Might as well build the kingdom that night under the stars. Vela opened a private signal to the Alari network. Her image appeared across hidden channels, rebel groups, disabled veterans, and underground networks. She spoke calmly, with pride in her voice. My name is Vela Scrapborn. I was once royalty, abandoned and forgotten in a junkyard. But I survived not because I was strong, but because someone believed I was still worth something. If you are lost, if you are broken, if you have nowhere else to go, come, there is a place for you. You are not trash. Within days, small ships began to arrive, quiet, careful landings hidden in the night. Rick helped build new shelters, while Vela organized parts, food, and energy supplies. They used broken machines to build prosthetics, made walking sticks from pipes, created beds from cargo foam. There was an old 3-armed miner who lost his home. A blind alien girl who was cast out by her village. A mute war veteran who hadn't spoken in 10 years. They came, not as soldiers, but as survivors. And they stayed. Rick watched as Vela rolled through the camp one evening, greeting everyone. With nods and quiet strength, he saw how they looked at her not as royalty, but as a leader. Someone who had fallen further than them. And still rose. Later that night, Rick handed Vela a small object-to-metal badge. On it was a symbol, a broken crown surrounded by stars. What's this? She asked. Your flag, Rick said. For the kingdom of junk. She held it gently. Eyes glistening. No, she whispered, for the kingdom of hope, that same night. Rick stood by her side as they lit the first beacon, an old signal tower modified to shine bright into the sky, not as a warning, but as a welcome. The message was simple. You are not alone anymore. As the stars above watched quietly, Rick turned to Vela. You've changed, you know? She looked at him, confused. How so? You smile now, he said, even when there's no reason. Vela looked up at the stars. Maybe I've finally found one, she whispered. They stood together under the wide galaxy sky, surrounded by broken ships and healing hearts. There were no thrones here, no golden robes, no titles. Just a man with scars and a woman with no legs building something beautiful from ruins. And maybe, just maybe, the world would remember them not as the forgotten, but as the ones who built a future from a pile of trash, one piece at a time, one soul at a time, one human and one alien. Side by side,